Hello, BookTube. I have been thinking periodically throughout the day, every time I thought I had changed my mind to some other subject, I've been realizing and thinking all over again that it's just a week. It's just a week left that my country has before it goes through something that has never happened before, something that has no parallel in its own history, or I would argue in any other history. It's just a week. A week is such a short time. All 70%, the solid 70% of the United States population that adamantly refuses to pay attention to anything about politics, anything about the election, anything about politicians, that 70% is going to wake up a week and a day from now in a daze. Just what is going on? Wow, where did this come from? And all throughout the day, well, I've been doing other things. I've been thinking of that. And some of the other things, once I realized that that thought kept coming back to my mind, I tried actively to banish it. And one of the ways that I did that was to start physically rearranging things here at Hyde Cottage in preparation for a massive book rearrangement. Uh, and that went really well. It went really well. It's there's not a lot that I can physically do anymore, but nevertheless, there's undeniable truth to the old statement, the old nostrum, that the best cure for melancholy is movement. That is true. Absolutely true. I remember the years and years and years and years where I would not have missed my nightly running ritual for all the mud in Egypt. I would not have missed it because all the tangles and clouds and echo chambers of the day were just washed away by that nightly run. And that had an effect today like that. But it's kept coming back to me, and I thought, uh, a week is such a short time. A week left. A week left before we have to deal in America, where we have to deal with stories about 1,777 fake electors, not 20, 1,777. A week in which, after which we get to see what a major candidate for president announced on the stage of Madison Square Garden in front of 20,000 people. He announced that he intends to steal the election. Still a free man. Hasn't been not been visited by Homeland Security or Secret Service. Has not been summarily jailed without due process by a sitting president who, according to the Trump court, could legally do that. I Yeah, he got up there on stage and said, well, basically he said, well, it doesn't really matter what happens at the ballot box because I've got a plan. I've got a secret. I'm not going to tell it to you. I'm going to spring it on you once the election has happened. And he has a number of willing legislative aides, people in the government now. He's not in the government now, but people in the government now who are announcing, they're confirming that they are in fact going to help him steal the election. And it's just a week until that happens. Where once upon a time, 30 years ago, you would have a presidential election and there would be a winner and there'd be a loser. And then there'd be Lyndon LaRouche way off on the sidelines underneath a pup tent in somebody's backyard saying that the election was rigged and that he actually won. And we were all free to ignore that. We weren't some struggling former Eastern Bloc country with no history of democracy, of participatory democracy. We weren't some country like that. So when we had an election, we would have an election, and that would be that. And that's never going to come back. That's never going to stop. Because we allowed an insurrectionist to run for president of the country he tried to overthrow. As you can see, the subject has been persistently on my mind. And I don't want it to be, and I don't want it to be on your mind either, because keep in mind, there's nothing any of us can do about this. So, I mean, I understand on an objective level that there's no point in worrying about it if there's nothing you can do about it. The vast numbers of people who lived in Carolingian France had no control whatsoever about whether or not their king took them to war, whether or not the king lost the war, whether or not they became serfs in someone else's country. then no control over that whatsoever. Now, the end result might be negative, might be tragic. I don't foresee a way that this won't be. Uh, but okay, tragedy will have enough unpleasantness of its own without you compounding it by worrying ahead of time needlessly. And I know that. I know that. Despite the fact the subject's been on my mind all day, I do know that. So I thought that for this Steve stream, to open this Steve stream, which will be short, we would go over something, we would talk about something that doesn't have anything to do with the news. And that's interesting. And that's at least now legal. And that is keeping a journal, keeping a personal journal. Tried and true subject. I've talked about it many times on my channel. Well, I thought we'd go through it again just because it's calming. The subject is calming, but also the action is calming. And that's one of the major reasons why you should do it if you don't already. Peaceful and quiet here all day. So what I mean by keeping a journal is it's pretty specific. And I don't mean the type of feather quill pen in inkwell on rolled parchment in elvish script, my latest profound thoughts. I don't mean that. That is performance. That is inherently fake. I mean a journal where either at the end of the day, if you want to do it that way, or at the beginning of a day about the day before, if you want to do it that way, or a little bit distractedly, a way that I don't particularly advocate, piecemeal throughout the day, you are recording your own life. You are writing the book of you. I think the typical way to do this, the way that I would advocate, is to write a journal entry at the end of the active part of every day, right? So you've got the day and it's picking and pecking at you and you're spinning in all directions. You're doing all sorts of things and it's active. Now, if you're managing your time correctly, there will be a non-active, I almost want to say passive point of your day where you read for a bit. And this isn't meant to take away from that. But in the changeover, when your day stops being active, I've always argued that that is the time to write a journal entry. And that your journal entry should be fairly workaday, because that's going to have a huge number of positive effects that don't have anything to do with you recording anything in a scroll in Edoras. That won't have anything to do with doing that. You are not keeping a journal for an audience. You're not keeping a journal for readers, only your future self. That's all. One of the big things that forms a silly intimidation factor with keeping a personal journal is people thinking that they're writing for an audience when you're not. And that intimidation factor should go right out the window. Instead, you're writing for future you. Because although if you're young, you might believe that you're never going to forget any of the little details that you're going through right now. You're never going to forget them at all. And that's totally wrong. Nothing could be further from the truth. You don't believe it. But in 10 years, you won't remember anything that's happened to you right now. You certainly won't remember anything that you thought. You won't remember any of the little things that are second nature to you right now. And that will be fascinating to that you 10 years from now. That you 10 years from now is going to want you to remind that person what your laptop wallpaper is right now. That person is going to want you to remind him what music you were listening to, what your earworm was, what was in the news, sure, but also what wasn't in the news. What were you doing during the day? Where did you go to lunch? Who were you talking to and what about? I maintain that the most satisfying kind of journal to keep is not artsy fartsy, why I am a stoic thoughts with a capital T, but rather that, a narrative account of your life. And the key word there is narrative, because that is a muscle that you can incredibly build with keeping a journal. Of course, keeping a journal has many, many positive aspects, and most of them are personal and private, but some of them redound to writing. If you get to the end of the busy part, the active part of your day, and you're looking back on that day, and you want to capture it on the page, and let's say you're giving yourself only one page to do it, and let's say, practically speaking, you don't have all that much time. Well, if you're gonna do that, if you're going to capture that day and you're going to do it in any way that strikes you as satisfying, you're going to have to learn how to control English prose, your own English prose. You're going to have to learn to control it to a masterly degree. After a while, those muscles are going to become extremely strong from doing that, from writing the book of you every day and being completely honest with yourself. The one way that we should all imitate Samuel Pepys, shouldn't imitate him in any other way, but the one way we should all imitate him in our private journals is that, boy, oh boy, there is no looking over your shoulder at the rest of the world. You're being completely blunt. You're being completely honest with yourself, and about others. It might seem like a weird shift. Of course, I'm not saying that you're lying about the rest of the world all during the day, but you are being diplomatic. You live as a social being. We all do. So you're being diplomatic and guarded throughout the day. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or ruin a relationship where the truth might make work difficult or school difficult. But in your journal, you can say all of that. You should say all of that. You should not carry any pretenses over into your journal. And eventually, those skills will develop to such a point that you'll find it easier and easier to remember every important thing from the day. All the stuff that you wanted to include as an exercise that you could do that I think is a lot of fun and that definitely gets better as time goes on is to recall dialogue. See if you can put actual spoken dialogue in your journal page for that day. And don't forget the specifics. I want to show you what I'm talking about. Here is a larger sized journal book. This is a blank page sketchbook. So I haven't started on this one. As you can see, this will be for 2025. And the way I do it, this is a larger thing. It's not lined, and the reason that I do it larger like this is a couple of things. One is that I love to sketch, actually sketch, not just write. So if I'm making a journal entry and I feel like sketching something, or if I'm making a journal entry and I'm just looking across idly at my dog and I want to sketch her, I can do that right there. I don't have to go up and get other paper. But also I like the larger size because it allows me to fill it with mementos, with little things here and there. So I don't go out much. I don't do much. But if I were, let's say I were to go out to a restaurant with friends, let's say friends come in from out of town and I haven't seen them. I don't usually go out or leave Frida. But let's say that I did. Well, I might save a business card and maybe a menu or perhaps the bill, perhaps a copy of the printout of the bill and put that in here. If there's a little piece of mine in a newspaper that where I don't have the book anymore, so I'm not going to ordinarily a review of mine, if it ran in a newspaper, I would clip it, fold it, date it, and put it in the book that it's reviewing. But if I don't have the book anymore, which is a lot of the time, I don't keep a lot of the books that I review, then it can go in here. If there's an interesting article or perhaps a touching obituary, that would go in here. And the larger the book, the easier that is to do, to fill the whole thing. But so when I'm starting a volume, I leave the first 4 or 5 pages blank. One of the things that I'm going to do on one of those pages is date and title the book, which I have been doing forever. So it would be the year in big block numbers right here. And then below it, the year of, and then something. Whatever that thing is, whatever that most standout thing is, what is that year in the chronicle of your life? What is it the year of? For the standard thing here would be the birth of a child. It'd be the year of and then the child's name. Or in my case, well, in any case, really, a massive storm that upends your whole life, a massive health problem that upends your whole life. Whatever it is, it's that. And then, of course, the year of I can write, but the thing stays there. That stays blank until the end of the year. That stays blank until all the way to the end of the volume. When at the end of the year, I will also leave a few pages blank because I like to start my journal ahead of time with a little bit before. Where before we get to the year of and before we get to the journal entry for the first day, I have a few pages to set the scene, a prologue of the year. Not an account, not an exhaustive account at all of the previous year, but where am I before the year starts? And then you hit the ground running on day-to-day entries. And the way I do those is up in the corner here, I write the date, the weekday, the date, the year. I underline that and put a box around it. And then underneath that, I have another box set off from the body of the page. And that box has quotidia, bullet pointed quotidia. So, what did I write that day? Exactly. Did I write a published weekly review? Did I write a review for a newspaper? A bullet point and what that thing is. Did I receive any money that day? Bullet point and the amount. Did I spend any money that day? A bullet point and the amount. And then underneath the amount, what did I spend it on? Did I go anywhere that day? A bullet point and just the places. Was there extraordinary weather? A bullet point and the weather. Did it pour? Was there thunder and lightning? Was there a power outage? Was there work being done on the street? Did a famous person die? A famous person, in addition to the bullet point up at the top here, it's a little black box, a little black banner. As a visual aid to me, when I'm flipping through the journal, that means someone either that I knew or was famous died. And that all goes up here. That's very discreet. That doesn't go down the whole length of the page. That's very discreet right there. Maybe below that, I would have a little indicator, another little box of books acquired that day, books received in the mail. But probably that would be in the main body of the journal entry. So you've got the date up here, a box for the day's quotidia, and then the whole rest of the day, just this page, not flipping over to the next one, but getting all the way to the bottom. Just that page for what happened during the day and what it made you feel. Now, you might be wondering, if it's not for outside readers, how often do you reread your journals? And the answer is never. I never reread my journals. And I've been keeping a daily journal for decades and decades and decades, just decades and decades. I've tried every format that you can imagine, every variation. I always come back to a blank book like this because I like to sketch. I like the freedom of it. I think lines restrict. And I also fill them with things. They become a kind of ersatz scrapbook. And yet I never go back and look at them, never. And so you might be wondering, well, if that's true, if you never go back and look at them, then why would you do it? I want to tell you I want to answer that question with a lot of things that are going to sound a little. I want to answer that question with things that are going to sound a little dippy, but they're still true. It really brings calm. Not only does it clarify your thoughts, because in the course of chronicling that day, you're going to be, remember, completely honest with yourself. So if you're irritated with someone and you shouldn't be, that's the time to hash it out. On the page, is this reaction that I'm having? I've now had it for 3 days straight about this same thing. Does it make any sense? Should I be having this reaction? But also gratitude for things that have happened during the day that maybe happened in a rush, so you weren't grateful for them when they did. Boy, oh boy, I was irritated by that pause at a crosswalk. But then thinking back on it, I realized that I would have died if I hadn't done that. Moments like that, you want to hash out that day, but you do not want to take forever. But the hashing out of that day is incredibly calming. It really does give perspective. It really does help you not just to live your life, but to savor it, to think about it. That's an amazing benefit. It really is. So there are all sorts of formats that you could do this in. This is the one that I have settled on. There's something about switching at the end of the day from a day of typing every time, typing all kinds of things, hundreds and hundreds of emails, tons and tons of prose. There's something about shifting from a day of typing to the deep breath calm of actually holding a pen in my hand that is immensely calming. It's immensely relieving. You come to look forward to it. And there's the satisfaction of watching the whole thing grow over the years, over the course of the year. The page after page after page goes in. Some days, I mean, I'm not being ultra strict about this. The fact that I'm limiting it to one page is mainly because I have been a writing instructor many, many times, and it is an invaluable way of strengthening your writing muscles to say, "I've only got this page to summarize my whole day." But there are plenty of days, that's just an exercise, right? There are plenty of days where I want to go on a little more, where I want to write for 2 pages, um, or more. And a big book like this full of blank pages gives me plenty of room to add in lists, to do blocked off commonplace things, excerpts from books that I'm reading, or uh, maybe uh, graphs or entries of books received or books gotten rid of. This gives me all the room in the world to maneuver with all of that. And noodling around in all of that stuff when no one's ever going to see it, when you're not going to look at it again, it is not navel gazing. The elven script by the light of one flickering candle is navel gazing. But real journaling of the kind I'm talking about is not navel gazing. You know as well as I do that you put your feet on the ground at the beginning of a day, and it starts to spin you like a centrifuge. Even happens to me, and I barely do anything. I can only imagine how much it is for the rest of you. It's really, really helpful, not just in terms of the clarity of your logical thought, but also in terms of your peace of mind. It's really, really helpful to stop that process before your head hits the pillow for your 9 hours of drooling on a pillow all night long. It's really helpful to stop that process, take control of it, wind it down, and write it out. What was this that happened today? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling right now? I'm feeling particularly angry, and I'm looking around right now. I'm still spinning, of course, but looking around right now and spinning in all directions, I can't name why I'm feeling angry. You start to journal regularly, and that confusion will go away. Uh, you could, of course, do it in any kind of other format. You could keep a journal on your iPad. Apple Notes is a free inbuilt note-taking program. William Gallagher tells me that it's reasonably encrypted. It's unlikely that anyone would be able to take it. Of course, you could lose it in a way that you really can't lose this unless you have a physical catastrophe. And you can't add anything to it that's not linking or a JPEG that you put in there. I do journal electronically, but only here and there, thoughts here and there. The written journal is really, for me, the way to go, mainly because it disconnects you from the interconnected world. While you're doing this, you are not distractible. Uh, which I guess is the explanation for why so many dude bros like to write all their prose longhand, but that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You're gonna have to type it anyway. But a journal entry, uh, there are all sorts of ways that you can do it. I've done them all. Loose leaf pages, loose pages of paper, lined notebooks, little pocket notebooks, bullet journals. I've done them all. But the kind of approach that I'm talking about, where you have a little box up in the corner for the quotidia of the day, which, believe it or not, I know it bursts the bubble of self-regard, but your future self is only going to be interested in that box. Your future self is not going to read the page. That's for you. Writing the page is for you now. Your future self is only going to want to know, oh, Benny's restaurant. I remember that. God, can you imagine what a bowl of soup cost then? Sure doesn't cost that now. Oh, that show on TV. I remember that. If you are listening to me right now and you are young, you do not believe you will ever reach a point when that won't all be there. No need to journal it. It'll all be there. And that's wrong. That's dead wrong. I don't remember a single thing, a specific thing that I did, place that I went when I was 20. Not a single thing. And that was 8 years ago. But anyway, that was the subject that I wanted to open this with. Is keeping a journal, keeping a personal journal, which if you don't, you should try. It is, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it is something that will improve you. You'll be really glad that you did it. Once you've done it for a month or two, you'll be really glad that you did it, because it deepens you, and it gives you a greater in your hand possession of your own life, the way you're living your own life. If you react to stimulus A today, And at night, when the day has stopped spinning you around, you're thinking, I didn't react to stimulus A really well at all. I don't think, but I don't really know. I haven't really sat down and figured it out, but I don't like how I reacted to it at all. And then you go to sleep without writing it down, without pondering it, without pondering it, then stimulus A tomorrow is going to work you up again. Whereas if you sit down and write about it, you will be in a better position to deal with it when it next happens. And that's true for negative things and positive things. So I wanted to champion it. I've championed it on my channel before, but uh, I mean, your journal is not a place for momentous events. We go to famous journals, like, for instance, Samuel Pepys' journal. We go to his journal for momentous events, Great Fire of London, the plague. We go to him because he kept a journal through those events, and we go to other journals for similar things, the bombing of London or whatnot. So I guess it was natural that part of this was on my mind today because we have only a week left. There's just a week left in America. So that feels historical, but I wouldn't advise going on and on about an election in your journal. So your future self is not going to care as much as you think. But anyway, let's move over to the chat. I have bloviated quite enough in championing this. Make a journal and give it a try in the new year. And maybe if you've got a notebook, just a spare notebook, not the thing that you're going to use in 2025, maybe in order for it not to be frustrating for all the dumbest reasons in 2025, if you've never done it before, maybe start now. Just, it doesn't have to be anything. You don't even have to keep it. Just loose pieces of paper. Start now to try it so that by the time January 1st rolls around, it won't be quite so strange if you've never done it before. That would be, I think, a piece of advice. But now let's see what the chat has to say. We'll go for half an hour. Nietzsche and Wig is here, of course, right out of the gate. Aslan says hello. Nietzsche and Wig says, "Hey Steve, I spent the afternoon making assessments and listening to Handel's Messiah in Costa. How was your afternoon?" My afternoon was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. It followed a late morning that was fantastic as well, but that has left books all over the floor, empty shelves everywhere. I rearranged furniture here at Hyde Cottage. I am rather strongly enjoined not to do that, to sit and watch others do it, but I did it myself. I didn't want to wait. And I like how it turned out. I really do. There were a couple of elements of the way it was before that were bugging me. They were experiments and they failed. And the thing about that, if you do an experiment, you move someplace somewhere because you want to see, will this work? Will I like it? And it doesn't work, you got to move it back as soon as you're sure. You can't just leave it there. Aslan says, yes, the mass demoralization is the bane of democracy. Manny says, hello, Steve. What did you read today? I read way too much of the Shorter Peeps. And I don't mean too much in that it was bad. The Shorter Peeps is great, but there's no reason for me to do it when I have so much else to read. I read that new Philip Schuyler biography, an ignored general of the American Revolution, and also, against my better judgment, I read a chunk of that 2025 book on Robert Frost and his poetry. I have almost not broken down at all to read 2025 books in 2024 this year, but something about it intrigued me, and I read a chunk of it. I'm not going to continue reading it. I'm going to leave it for my poetry person. And I also read a book about holistic dog care. Don't rush your dog to the vet for pills or treatments, and definitely don't buy your dog bags of commercial dog food. That's what this author was saying, and was laying out all the reasons why. Dylan Matthias says, it's nice to try to get one's mind off what is coming, though it feels ever present. I returned to Mencken recently and couldn't enjoy him knowing that his disciples are trying to do to America. The tendrils of it are everywhere, but it's worthwhile for you to find a place those tendrils don't reach, which is kind of odd considering how I opened this video, but I'd like to think that I redeemed myself by talking about journal keeping. Kevin JN says, Steve, have you watched Jordan Peterson's new video endorsing Trump because Elon Musk will fix the waste? He had a great looking blue suit on and a gorgeous book study backdrop. Unfortunately, yes, I did watch that video, and the he is echoing the one of the number one things that was said among all the young dude bros at Trump's Madison Square Garden Nazi rally, which is not constitutional. It's not legal in any way. But basically, they're all thinking that Elon Musk will be appointed Chancellor of the United States. There is no such position. There is no such position. The position there that these dude bros are all thinking Elon Musk is going to occupy doesn't exist. But much less have any power. I mean, the vice presidency doesn't have any power. They're expecting him to be Chancellor of America, maybe Vice Regent of America. That's not how it works. There's no possibility. There's no way to give Elon Musk that ability, any of the abilities under the current Constitution. So when Musk talks about, when he does that stupid, oily disclaimer of his, happy to serve as long as I'm required, no money required, you don't need to pay me. The unspoken bit being, you don't need to pay me because I'll have unlimited authority over anyone's life, every aspect of anyone's life. And you also don't need to pay me because I will simply deny all government contracts to anyone but me. That ought to be worth a cool 300 trillion. But anyway, Nietzsche and Wig says Mencken would make short work of Trump. Grace Alexander says, hi, Steve. I'm reading The Last of the Wine. What do you think of it? What Mary Renault should I read next? Was thinking of the Alexander trilogy. I love Last of the Wine. I think it's just great. And one of the things I love about it, quite apart from all the different ways that it makes 4th century Athens come alive, you'll never read a history of 4th century Athens. If this is your introduction to Pericles, to the Athens of Socrates, if this is your introduction to that Athens, then you will never, if you then go to history books, you'll never look at them the same way, because this is so intensely alive. But also, I love how adult it is. It's remarkable for all the things that it doesn't do, that contemporary historical fiction feels like it has to do with a ladle. The two main characters are obviously falling personally, emotionally, and erotically in love with each other for page after page after page. Their troop mates know it perfectly well. Do we see the moment? No. Do we get a stupid 4-page bit of scorching one-handed dialogue? No, we don't. It is assumed that we are adults. And the same thing is true in the first book in the Alexander trilogy, Fire from Heaven. Same thing is true. It's not two soldiers here, it's Alexander and Hephaestion, but it's equally well done. Fire from Heaven is it's a little bit less enjoyable for me because so much of it is taken from Plutarch, and I know Plutarch backwards and forwards. We don't know what really happened in Alexander's youth and boyhood. We don't know that. It's all folklore from centuries later. It's really good folklore, and Mary Renault pays it the ultimate compliment of not changing it. She doesn't degrade it like a modern historical fiction author would. Instead, she takes it at face value and then just writes the hell out of it. Oh my God. The scenes in the first, I don't tend to think of it as an Alexander trilogy at all. But that book, the one would be the first book, The Fire from Heaven, about the youth of Alexander, has some scenes in it. Same thing with The Last of the Wine. It has scenes in it that you will just never forget. Never. The scene in The Last of the Wine where the older lover is facing someone in a wrestling match and is simply outdone, and his young lover is in the audience wondering, is he going to die? Same thing with the chariot race scene. You just never forget it. And in Fire from Heaven, there are moments like that as well that are just incredible. Most of them are cribbed from Plutarch, and in Plutarch, they're also incredible. The scene where Alexander meets and tames his famous horse Bucephalus, for instance, is wonderful in Fire from Heaven. It's done perfectly. And there are a couple of other moments. There are a couple of famous Greeks from Plutarch that Mary Renault clearly doesn't like at all. I wouldn't recommend the whole trilogy, because the trilogy, when people call it that, they say it's Fire from Heaven, The Persian Boy, and then Funeral Games. And Funeral Games is a weak book, and Alexander's not in it. So I would definitely recommend Fire from Heaven. I would definitely recommend The Persian Boy, but your reading time is very limited, very limited. So, and if you're totally head over heels in love with Mary Elton, you might be, then you'll probably want to read Funeral Games. But otherwise, read her standalones. The Mask of Apollo, The Praise Singer, they are so good, and they're not nearly as well known. Uh, Nietzsche and Wig says recommendation for everyone: rewatch HBO Rome. Ian McNeice's newsreader character alone is gold. Well, but you don't get to make recommendations in my live stream, right? Would think not. But Rome has a couple of good moments scattered throughout, and it has Titus and Pullo. The series tells the rise and the fall of Julius Caesar and the events after that, and looked at from 30,000 feet, you would think, okay, well, that's familiar territory. And the scene where Julius Caesar is assassinated is really well done. But the series entirely belongs to two Roman enlisted men that are just incredible. they're just incredibly done. So, Aslan says, I thought about keeping a journal to document my daily life, but I have nothing to write about. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. You do. You not only have stuff to write about, you have stuff that your future you is going to want to read about. Thomas Mallon puts it really well in his book about journal keeping, a book of one's own, where he says that nothing, it turns out, almost never happens. That's absolutely true. That the your life is full of stuff to write about. Anyway, Sarah Bell says yes to keeping a journal. I was just stuck at a UK train station for 5 hours, had fun writing to pass time in the journal. Well, that's another thing too. If you bring it with you, the thing about I used to have these pebble covered black on it. Excuse me, unadorned blank sketchbooks. I used to use these forever in the smaller size, and those I could bring with me anywhere, and I did. But they started to annoy me because they weren't very good for storing anything. They weren't very good for sticking stuff in there. And that realization came hand in hand with my realization that I really don't go anywhere anymore. So I just opted for the bigger size. Aslan says, by the way, where does the thumbnail come from? Well, that would be Nosferatu. Gandhi says, how long after election day do you think a winner will be declared? It won't be just one winner who's declared. This will be a constitutional coup. Um, I won't say a civil war, but a civil rift, definitely. So there will be states where you go and the airplane pilot announces, or the sign on the road says that in this state Donald Trump is president. But we won't have even that until Thanksgiving at the earliest, which is the longest we've ever gone. This is going to make Gore v. Bush look like a picnic. Let's see here. Gandhi says again, not sure if you addressed, but why does your photo show you with glasses? Because I used to wear glasses. I used to wear glasses all the time, except for reading. I used to wear glasses all the time. Uh, Actually, when David was here just recently, we found the pair of glasses that I used to wear. It was in one of the kitchen drawers. We were looking through it for power cord adapters. We found those. I stopped wearing them during the pandemic because when I had my mask on, my glasses fogged up. So I said, well, enough of this. I'm not like a lot of people who wear glasses. I don't really use vision to navigate in the world. I use hearing and scent and whatnot, especially hearing. So I'm pretty sure that day I said, I'm pretty sure I can just tuck these in a pocket and do without them for the rest of the day rather than take them off every 3 seconds to clean them. And I put them in that pocket and just never took them out again. I never used them again. And I don't understand it. I'm not going to get all Alex Jones. This is not a weird, the lizard people healed me. But something changed. Since the pandemic, I have not needed them at all. In fact, just the other day, I took them out. Since David and I found them, I took them out, that pair of glasses out, I cleaned them. And I did put them in my pocket when I went out and about for errands. I thought, well, at various points throughout these errands, I will put these on, see if it makes a big difference. It didn't make any difference at all. In fact, I didn't like it. Uh, Nietzsche and Wig says, I was journaling during my traumatic uni experience. I have torn out pages that are too worn to reread. Luca says, I just started a journal this year and find when I read it over months later, I remember details I'd completely forgotten. It'll be revelatory experience in a couple of years. Yeah. Yeah. Although, well, I don't know. It takes all types. Everybody's different about how they keep a journal. I never look back at mine. So maybe you will. Too traumatizing is what Nietzsche and Wig meant to say. Dylan Mathias says, I've tried to keep a journal in the past, but I've struggled to find the sweet spot. I've been prone to pretentious pontificating or am so austere it turns into little more than a ledger or date book. Okay, well, the pretentious pontificating must be avoided at all costs. So in this case, if that is the struggle to find a sweet spot, then I think the answer is obvious. Make it a ledger. Make it what is called in the productivity circles of YouTube a bullet journal, and then grow it from there. So a bullet journal is just, it's not whole sentences. It's just this, 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 this. You could start it that way and then grow those entries out gradually from the bottom up instead of the way pretentious pondering does, which is from the top down. Jenny Park says, this is an early stream and I'm late. Beg forgiveness. Denied. Comics Gaze says, Steve, that Philip Schuyler biography you recently got is part of a 2-volume set. By the way, I dislike Schuyler for his aristocratic views. Yeah, I'm sure that the other volume will turn up at the Brattle. I'm sure that the person who had this one will have the other volume. And we'll have to agree to disagree about his aristocratic views. Steve Ronstein says, hey, Steve, how do you feel about dogs being trained and used for police work? I don't like it. Of course, I don't like it. Monet Doyle says hello. Mandy says, what about using a typing machine while smoking a cigar and drinking a glass of whiskey? Is that acceptable? No, on a whole bunch of different levels. No, it isn't. No one's watching you. You're not the main character. You're not a character in a book. Aaron Facer is here. A Stevestream about journaling just at my usual journaling time. So you have a regular journaling time? I found that most journal keepers do. They may play around with it for a while, but eventually they settle into a regular time. To my mind, the camps have always been fairly divided. About 30% of the people I know who've kept regular journals for a long time write in the morning to organize their thoughts, look forward to the day, and summarize the day before. And then 70% write at night. They write in that turning point between the active whirling part of the day and the quiet part of the day. They write in order to transition from one period to another. So you're a nighttime journal keeper. Mystery and Mayhem is here. Oh no, Mystery and Mayhem arrived and the chat jumped. That can't bode well, can it? My journaling had been intermittent, so I've ended up with various notebooks and sketchbooks and scrap paper scattered around with fragmentary, unfinished thoughts and ideas. My discipline sucks. Well, discipline is muscle. It doesn't come ready out of a box. You've got to build it like a muscle. Nietzsche and Wig says, thinking of how to leverage my writing and singing ability to break out of my social isolation and link up with other arty people thanks for your encouragement on here. I'm glad to encourage. You should. Aslan says, there are lots of things I forgot about my childhood and only remember when talking to siblings. I can only imagine what keeping a journal allows you to remember. Well, no, I would say it's just the opposite. Although it sounds like clever wordplay, it allows you to forget. It allows you to forget. You don't have to worry so much anymore because it'll be there in your book. And not only will it be there in the book of you for you, but it'll be there for other people. If there's ever when you're gone, if someone would have found this interesting, it'll be there for them. Kevin Toll Reads is here. Hey, Steve, it's almost nonfiction November. Yeah, I could tell from your latest thought-provoking video. What do we feel about characters? How relatable are they? How three-dimensional are they? What do you feel when they live or die or cast the wrong spell at a certain point in a dungeon because it just didn't cross your mind that there are characters in nonfiction? Right? You live a life without nonfiction. That is so unbelievable. Anyway, it was a good video, though. I might do a response. So that feels treasonable to do a response to a video that's so clearly aimed at fiction when we're on the doorstep of nonfiction November. Levi says, I have tried and failed at journaling numerous times and may try again using your method. My method does work. It does work. As with most things, the key is not the practice, it's your mind frame. And that box, that box of quotidia on the upper left-hand corner under the date, I even make that in a different pen color. It's a totally separate thing. When did I start the day? What did I eat? What did I spend? What money did I get? Who did I talk to? What work did I get done? What was the weather like? Doing that box first frees the rest of the journal entry for a bigger and more interesting things. And it's just a question of getting into the habit. Once you do, once you're in the habit of it, you'll really like it. You'll look forward to it. Uh, Comics Gaze says, "Is it true Queen Victoria was politically a reactionary?" No. Nietzsche and Wig says, very interesting that Queen Victoria didn't care about high church Anglican religion, of which the British monarchy is supposed to be the defender. She was a low church woman like her Lutheran husband. JJ says, hello, Steve. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well. You're fired. Today is my birthday, and I was given I was given a lovely copy of Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon that I can't wait to sink my teeth into later tonight. It's terrific. Oh my, what a present. Huge doorstop of a book. Wow. Martin S. says, do you like Michael Palin's diary? Sure. Dylan Matthias says, given Nonfiction November is just around the corner, would you consider making nonfiction starter kits on various topics? Well, I've made nonfiction starter kits on hundreds of topics, but I am going to do more. Yeah, I'd like to oddly, in a weird way, I know it doesn't make sense, but I would like to make amends for my total failure with Victober. Total failure. I barely said the word Victober at any point in October's length. I'd like to make up for that by really going whole hog with Nonfiction November. Jerome Jacobson says, are there any scenes in Samuel Pepys' diary that you'd like to ask Pepys about if he was still alive? Not really. No, he and I talked plenty when he was alive. Comics Gaze, do you think it has ever been possible for a president to represent all 50 states? Yeah. Yeah, I do. The president is just one person. He doesn't have any mystical ability, except for the 150 million people who think that their president, as they put it, does have mystical ability. But by represent all 50 states, I think what I would hope what you mean is represent the best interests of Americans. So if there's a train crash in Louisiana, if there's a mudslide in Alaska, if there's a trade deal that's going to kill California, well, then I'll weigh in. I'll do what I can as president. The idea of helping, not of swooping in to make my 20% cut. Manny says, I watched the Jordan Peterson video today, and it was the most frustrating video I've watched in a while, but it didn't ruin my day. I watched some Two Towers afterwards and then read Tolstoy. There you go. There you go. Nietzsche and Wig says, I have been reading the Katz translation of TBK. That's Brothers Karamazov, it's you and me. The most eloquent translation I think I've ever read thus far. Well, it does come well blurbed, does it not? Peyton says, when Donald Trump was on Joe Rogan's podcast, the very first topic brought up was The View. Are those ladies on Trump's list? And is an enemy prosecution list or an enemy decapitation list? Not all of the ladies on The View are on the list. Trump does have a list. Aides have seen it. And to a lot of them who aren't familiar with the maniac that they're serving, it doesn't make any sense, but it does make sense. The people at the top of the list are New York enemies and people who have mocked his finances. Those two things, more than anything else. There are lots of people on the list, but those are the two. Peyton says, sorry, what's the topic today? The topic is keeping a personal journal. Everyone should keep a personal journal, or try it. And I would say make 2025 the year. And if you're going to do that and you've never done it before, then start informally now with pages. Just loose pages. Just pull out a piece of paper and try to write up your day. What happened today? And what did I think of it all? How did it feel while it was happening? You can do that very informally so that when 2025 comes around, you have a book and you can start to write the book of you. Aslan says, will you do top lists of books for the first quarter of the 21st century? I should. I should definitely do that. Comics Gaze, Henry VI or Edward IV? I have no idea what the context is, of course. Andrew says, given your fondness for Blazing Saddles, would you agree that Young Frankenstein wasn't quite as inspired? Yes, I would. It's a little bit heretical, but yeah, I would. I would definitely agree with that. Uh, oh no, where did you go? What happened? What's going on here? Oh goodness. There we go. I'm only thinking about it because of Terry Garr's recent death. Yeah, no, it's not as inspired. Nothing is as inspired as Blazing Saddles. Uh, Street Medic is here. So Amazon is canceling the Kindle Vella program. So I'm going to transfer my Locked Room Mystery to an ebook / print on demand format. Not sure off the top of my head that I remember what Kindle Vella is. Jenny Park says, it's talking to Street Medic. Peyton says, what do you make of Tulsi Gabbard's full transformation into a Republican? Do you think Trump offered her a Secretary of State or some other job? She didn't transform into a Republican. She transformed into Trump cult. That is not Republican. It bears no resemblance to Republicanism at all. I know what you're saying, but let's make our terms clear. She did not become a Republican. She became a Trump cult member. And she's dumb, so maybe she is responding to some sort of promise, having 8 years and then 40 years before that in the private sector of incontrovertible black and white evidence that his promises were worth nothing. Street Medic says Young Frankenstein is better than Blazing Saddles. Well, you are incorrect. Jenny Park says, sorry, I'm a Men in Tights girls myself. Street Medic says, he's talking to Jenny Parks. Kevin Toll Reads is back. I knew I would get you to laugh, and I have a small book haul, and you are the main reason of this haul. Will be out tomorrow morning. Oh, I hope it's not Atomic Habits and the 4-hour work week and whatnot. I'd have that coming, considering how much I needle you. Jenny Park says, I'm looking forward to Nonfiction November. Only have one fiction book, and it's my reread of Return of the King. I was seriously considering this time around just reading nonfiction for Nonfiction November. I was seriously considering that, but I don't think there's any way I can do it. There's a lot of fiction coming out in November that I haven't read and want to read. Arbutus, as a relatively new watcher of your videos, yeah, I don't recognize your name. Steve, I have to say, I was astonished to see that you like reading Regency romances. What is about those books that appeals to you? Well, they're terrific stories, first of all, usually. And usually in the older Signet Regency romances, there's good dialogue, there's good witty repartee. And the ladies who wrote these books have a great deal of enjoyment writing them, and that comes through on the page. And they're great palate cleansers, really better palate cleansers than anything I know. Anti-Guy says, Steve, talk me off the ledge. What happened on Sunday night was possibly the most depressing thing ever. It wasn't the most depressing thing ever, but it was one of the darkest episodes in American history. That is not hyperbole. I don't recommend that you watch any of it, but historians or history-minded people do themselves a disservice if they just look at the clips. You really have to watch the whole thing to get a sense of what atmosphere everyone there was reveling in. It'll come out. It'll dawn on you. It'll unfold inside you after a while of watching. What are these comments? What are all these people? What is the tone here that I'm sensing, but no one is actually saying? It was one of the darkest moments in American history. I would argue, I know this sounds like hyperbole, but I would argue that it was much darker, a much worse event than the previous Nazi rally at the old Madison Square Garden. Comics Gaze says, what happened to the Irish royal families? Is it true that England massacred them all? They did indeed. Yes, indeed. And there were so many of them, so many different royal clans and lines. Every hilltop, every valley had a king. That Excuse me, typically speaking, a lot of Irish people or Irish Americans will say that they're descendants of kings. I know for sure that I am not. I'm perfectly willing to admit that. Hannah's Books is here. Night Journaler here. I've written on computer for decades, but decided a few months ago to try paper again. I'm having internet addiction issues new to me due to political news. Yeah, Paper is better. I mean, I use uh, the iPad because it's so convenient, and I'm on the computer all day long. I'm writing all day long on the computer. It's the easiest thing in the world to call up an Apple Notes program and type something in there. But a notebook is much better. It's just much better. You'll feel better for doing it too. Uh, Auntie Gaia was next. Uh, Rogan said he wouldn't have Harris because he insisted on doing it in his studio. Right. Well, she wouldn't have gone anyway. It's enemy territory. She would have had to bring a full phalanx of Secret Service people, and what would that mean? The Secret Service people wouldn't just go and stand around. They would do a complete toss of the area. Do you have any idea how many unregistered guns are in Joe Rogan's compound? It's quite a few. So there's no way that it would happen. There's no way that it could have happened in his studio. Besides, she's the vice president of the United States of America. If she tells you to go to a studio to interview her, you go to a studio to interview her. Uh, anyway, uh, Manny says, I tried journaling, but I could never get into it. But after this stream, I'll go look for some paper. Also, I think it will be a great opportunity to improve my Russian and English. Well, yeah, you don't want to use your journal as an exercise book, but during your account of your day, if you want to, if you, as long as you're writing on the page, if you want to write a line or two in some other language or talk about why you're writing a line or two in some other language, that's great. And it's right there. It's easy to do. Uh, Street Medic says, isn't Facebook a modern version of a personal journal? No, because it's not yours. You don't own it. And I'm not talking just about the fact that if Facebook decided to take down your page, you couldn't get back any of it. I'm also talking about it even when you can get it back. Buried in line 100 in page 10 of the terms of service that you clicked accept without reading was Facebook saying that they own all the content that you put on their site. So no, it is certainly not an equivalent of keeping a personal journal. Jenny Park says, I don't have the discipline to write my fiction stories, let alone a journal. But discipline is a muscle. It isn't just a thing. It isn't like body height where you're stuck with the amount that you think you have. It grows the more you exercise it. And a journal every day will exercise your discipline. Cosmic Gaze says, I meant to ask that since the throne went back and forth between Henry VI and Edward IV, who do you think was the better king? The better king? Edward IV was the better king. Nietzsche Week says, I spent all of yesterday in Hampton Court, lots of fun, but sadly the royal toilet used by William III was not on display. Peyton says, do you think America should have an economic bill of rights? Harvey J. Kay helped Marianne Williamson add that to her presidential campaign, and I think it's a great idea. It is kind of a great idea. The chat jumped again. Let's see here. Peyton says, maybe during the week, only read nonfiction and read fiction on the weekend during the month of November. Yeah, there's a lot of fiction to be read before the end of the year, a lot of it. I guess I could just say, I mean, I'm thinking about my end of the year lists, which are not done yet. There are 3 places open on every list, including fiction and debut fiction. So I don't know. I don't know what. It'll be a lot of nonfiction. It doesn't maybe necessarily need to be all. Nietzsche Wig says, have you ever been salsa dancing? Just came back from doing that this evening and it felt strange. No, I have never been salsa dancing. Arbutus says, yes, my first time here on a Stevestream. I'm a fellow book reviewer in Ireland. You review books? Do you indeed? We should email each other. Good Lord. Manny says, I'm a little bit late, but I started reading Bring Up the Bodies along with you, and I got to say, this is one of the even more thrilling than the first one. Can't wait for you to do the Mirror and the Light, but you are going to have to wait for me to do Mirror and the Light because I'm not going to. I mentioned this the other day that when we finished Bring Up the Bodies, I thought I'll move to Wolf Hall, then we'll do Bring Up the Bodies. But I was forgetting briefly that the Mirror and the Light was a Steve Tiberius Donahue book club pick just a few months ago. So there's no reason for me to go at it again after such a short time. You just find those videos. Street Medic says, I don't generally do reading events, but I might reread The Discoverers by Daniel Boorstin for Nonfiction November. Ingrid Fitz says, hey, hi, Steve. I finally finished Not Just Burning, and wow, what a great book. Isn't it terrific? I went ahead and ordered two more of Iles's books. Oh, I see them all the time at the Brattle. You could have let me know. I could have found them for you. Uh, let's see here. Jenny Parks is talking to Arbutus. Aslan says, "What's your thoughts on Orientalism by Edward Said? It's on my list of nonfiction for November. You got to read it. It's foundational. So I mean, I disagree with a lot of it, uh, but you got to read it. So good that it's on your list." Aaron Facer says, "I'm considering reading Harrison's Past Thought for nonfiction November. I wonder if he was a morning or night journaler." Jenny Park says, "Is November the biggest month for new fantasy books?" Well, the biggest new fantasy book comes out in November, doesn't it? Or is that December? But there's a lot of them that come out then. Uh, Aaron Facer says, "Don't forget Dr. November," right? Which Dr. November is an event that I'm part of for November where we read espionage related fiction and nonfiction. You could do Dr. November without ever reading any fiction. Our read along, our group read is The Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad, but you could ignore that and just read espionage related nonfiction the whole time. You could do that if you wanted to. Uh, uh, the bookish knitter is here. Hello, all. I'm late, but wanted to pop in and say hi. Hello to you. Good Lord, how wonderful to see you. Cosmic Ace says, "Considering the Tarzan series is low quality, I am surprised the full Burroughs set goes for so much online. Maybe because it's out of print." I don't know what that's referring to. Uh, are you talking about the old Ballantine paperbacks? The black spine paperbacks? Those weren't low quality. They were cheap paperbacks, but they had beautiful cover art. Uh, but I didn't know they were going for a lot of money online. I had no idea of that. Dylan says, "Can't wait for Steve's end of the year list. They're like a wonderful treat at the end of the year, like an advent calendar of reading." uh, Anti Guy says, "Timothy Snyder called it anticipatory obedience." Yes. Yes. Uh, Peyton says, "If you were a college professor, what would you be teaching?" Writing. If I had my druthers, writing, definitely. That was the thing I enjoyed the most. I think I'm pretty good at it, and it'd be writing. I believe that it would be standing room only. I believe that would be the case. I would like to do that. I would like to teach a huge course on writing. If in a fantasy world where I was still teaching, I would be teaching a huge course in writing, and I'd do the same thing that I always did in courses like that. I would walk in and tell my TAs that I will not require them. You don't have to show up. You're not going to be given any authority or any responsibilities whatsoever. I'm going to do all this myself. I'll do whatever I can. You won't. I don't want you to lose any credits for participating, but you're not going to help me in any way. I'm going to deal with all these people myself, and then I would just move up into the crowd. This is not going to be a normal writing class. We're all going to do this together. I want to instill a habit in you that you're going to go to for the rest of your life. That I can't do that from behind this table down in front of all the rest of you. So, oh, I loved it. Anyway, Andrew says, "Is this Stevestream a clever way to avoid talking about Manwolf?" No, I did talk about Manwolf. I made a video. Uh, Colombian Thunder says, "YouTube seems to keep removing my comment." I don't understand that, but we've passed the time when we're wrapping up anyway. Uh, Dylan says, "I've been on a Conrad kick lately. I started Typhoon this morning and should finish this evening. Looking forward to the Dr. N. It's Dr. No. It's Dr. November. It takes 2 seconds to type out. Read along in November." Peyton says, "Will P. Diddy rat on everyone in Hollywood to lessen his sentence?" I doubt it very much because he knows what. I doubt it very much. I think he is probably industriously in the process right now of, through his lawyer, assuring the powers that be in Hollywood and Washington that he will not do that. Jenny Park says, "Would journaling be part of your course?" No, no. I would strongly recommend it because nothing builds the writing muscles. Oh, you stopped. Nothing. No, nothing builds the writing muscles like that. But a course would be about a lot more than that. It'd be about the tools of actually doing it. Uh, uh, OB Metal One, Steve, love your channel. Well, isn't that nice? Nietzsche and Wig says, really enjoying the nice, smooth, high quality paper of the Norton hardback of Brothers Karamazov that I'm reading right now. Anti Guy says Nosferatu looks amazing. I don't know anymore. I don't know if it looks amazing anymore. I don't know if it's even good anymore. I've seen it so many times. I'm gonna have to wait for the rest of you to tell me whether or not it's any good. Colombian Thunder says, any comment I write mentioning a certain political right wing candidate is just not showing up for you. I don't know what would cause that, because I have mentioned that person myself many times. Uh, what on earth is going on here? Good Lord. Okay, but I don't want to do any of these things. Oh, there we go. No, sorry, a box has cropped up asking for a whole bunch of. There we go. All right. Nick Piccoli says, I think I would have really enjoyed taking one of your classes. Well, I never got any negative complaints. Anti Guy says, we all know who would be included on P. Diddy's list. No way he's going to volunteer that info. He is thinking in essentials. He is thinking about Jeffrey Epstein. He is thinking about Jeffrey Epstein. No matter what calm, quiet, soft-spoken experts say on YouTube forensic analysis videos, Jeffrey Epstein was clearly murdered. And when you are in a position like this, you're thinking of essentials. It doesn't matter that your cell is cold, or that you can hear mice at night, or that you're told when you can stand, when you can sit, when you can eat, when you can exercise, when you can shower. It doesn't matter. You're still going to want to live. Uh, let's see here. Uh, Peyton says, if you were in college now, what would your majors be? I right now I would major in business and Chinese. Uh, Manny says, I've been going through the Oxford Book of English Verse while at the same time going through a similar Swedish anthology of verse. It has been really interesting. What a weird way to do it. That's wonderful. Colombian Thunder says, it's happened twice in a row for me. Quentin Curious Volume says, let me invite people to also consider joining Chekhovember, Seagull, Cherry Orchard, and 3 short stories in November. Yes, I wasn't invited to join this event. But yeah, it's an event in November called Chekhovember. I was not invited to join the event. I was not invited to help name the event. The name of the event obviously should be Anton November. But Chekhovember, a whole bunch of people are reading Chekhov, concentrating on Chekhov in the month of November. Peyton says, do you think Jay-Z will be investigated next? I doubt it. Quentin Curious Volume says, yes, I'm promoting my event in your stream. I don't mind at all. It's a great event. I have a whole bunch of Chekhov that I added to the e-reader because I intend to silently join along from the wings since I'm not invited into the floodlights. Aaron Facer, I'm off to drool on my pillow for a few hours. Ciao for now. Well, we're all wrapping up here. Columbia Thunder says, anyway, since the Steve stream is almost over, hope you have a good night, Steve. I'm going to read some Astro City. Oh man, what a good choice. Anti Gaia says, I would be learning. Excuse me. I'd be learning Spanish since in all likelihood I'm headed to Mexico since I'm a white Latino. Mm. Peyton says, do you have any dirt on Oprah? People are talking about her potentially dark history too. I would be amazed if she had a dark history. I would be amazed. Quentin Curious Volume says, Anton November was taken by fans of Jack Antonoff. The Street Medic says, I'm pretty fluent in street Spanish. Columbia Thunder says, I don't know if it's mentioning Trump or some other word in a comment was getting flagged. I find it hard to believe that YouTube flags individual comments in a live stream of a channel that's so small. It's a rounding error. I find that hard to believe. Kevin O'Connell says, just wanted to say thanks for your advice about writing. I've put aside time every day to write and have managed to write several short stories. Thank you again and happy Halloween. Well, that's wonderful to hear. It is absolutely essential. The point that I make about writing all the time is it's not going to happen on its own. You cannot say that you want to write without prioritizing the time to write. It's the same thing that years ago Eric Carl Anderson said about reading. People would ask him, how do you get so much reading done You have a job. How do you do it? And I would he's too nice to say this, but I would almost bet money that some of those questions were phrased in such a way so that the questioner was making it pretty clear that they don't believe that he does all that reading. I say that, uh, even though I don't do anything else. And his answer, imperturbably nice, has always been, well, if you want to do a lot of something, you have to organize your day. You have to plan to do a lot of that something, and he just does. Uh, Mystery and Mayhem says, have a great night, all. Cosmic A says, is the Penguin translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses worth getting? I know you said you prefer the Horseman translation, not the Horseman translation. What a thing that would be, the Horace Gregory translation. But the lovely Penguin trade paperback uh, is it's really good. Yeah. Nietzsche and Wig says, when is Hitchember going to be launched or Vidalulary? God help us. Oh my God. Peyton says, why major in Chinese and business to do international business? Would that be your passion, though? I'm trying to decide my majors when I go back to college. I figured you'd say English and history. Never major in your passions. Never. Never do that. You're spending a huge amount of money and a huge amount of time to get this paper. Major in something that will make your financial old age comfortable. I'd be doing exactly that reason for international business. Never major in your passions. Never do it. Manny says, I personally love the Penguin translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses. I love them both, heretical as that is. I love the current one, the one with that beautiful picture of a statue of Apollo transforming a woman into a tree. But I also love the older one that was in prose. I thought that was really well done. Street Medic says, I have a ton of Alfred Hitchcock paperback anthologies. Peyton says, you should start a life coaching 6-month course. I'd join. Can you imagine if I became a bro tube grifter, start a course? Oh, man, I could rake in the money. Except what would I spend it on? What would I spend that money on? Cosmic A says, what is the best biography of Alexander the Great, in your opinion? Probably the late, great Peter Green. But Mary Reynolds' book, The Nature of Alexander, is also amazing. It's also amazing. And can I put in a word here for my boy Plutarch? People don't read Plutarch, and they should. He's terrific. Um, Dylan says, I've noticed the messages come in faster when Steve starts trying to wind things down. We don't Huguenot your crowd too much. You are. Every time that happens. Street Medic says, Steve wants to be overlord of all the oligarchs. No, no, I don't. Uh, Jenny Parks is telling people to spam the chat. Albert is piping up with a flatly bad film opinion. Aslan says, can confirm, never major in your passion. Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. I did, but don't do it. Anti-Guy says, Hitchcock wrote books. No, and he didn't write the introductions to his anthologies either. He never wrote a word. Hannah's book says, I had several comments flagged in that live stream when I was sharing details about the deadly situation at your tea stop a couple of months ago. Particular kind of responder plus weapon. Wow. Well, I can't imagine that. It must be automated, but how could it be? How could it possibly be? Yeah, that was weird though. That was weird that we were sitting here as police were responding to an emergency at the subway stop that I use. Tolstoy 111 says, I co-majored in English and got an MA in English. This was in the 90s, so there was still a modicum of sanity in the department. There is no sanity in academia anymore, and there are no jobs. Don't do it. Don't do it. Save your passions for your free time. Nietzsche and Wig says, is Thomas Mitchell's book on Athens worth reading? Yeah. It's on my shelf, but I skimmed it and seen nothing special. It isn't anything special. It gets the job done. There are 4 or 5 books on Athens that are better. Aslan says, I'm thinking about reading 99 Variations on a Proof for Nonfiction November. I hope you enjoy it more than I did. Actually, that's not true. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I hope you get more out of it than I did. It didn't work on me at all. Peyton says, did you go to college? There are rumors I did. Manny says, I've been thinking about majoring in my passion, but I'm not so sure now. Don't do it. Don't major in your passion. Don't major in your passion. Either pre-law, pre-med if you have a head for figures, business, and some international language, some big international language, Japanese or Chinese. Street Medic says Arthur wrote the introductions to most of Hitchcock's anthologies. Peyton says my current job is offering free tuition if you major in special education. I was thinking I should do that for a career while I work on my passion. Then again, I don't want to be a special ed teacher. Yeah, it's a huge amount of time and effort. Even if your employer is offering you free tuition, it's still a huge investment. Uh, you'll always have a career in special ed, but if you don't want to do it, I mean, Jenny Parks says, does that mean I'd be better off learning about mythology and folklore on my own rather than going back to school? A degree in mythology. Well, if you're the daughter of an earl, then maybe you don't need to worry about it. If you don't need to worry about it, then sure, get a degree in mythology. Cosmic A says, I know you dislike Aristotle. What do you think of past Americans using his writings to defend slavery? I think it's amply easy to do using Aristotle. Street Medic says the army paid for his college. Nietzsche and Wig says, I don't regret studying history and politics because trying to study a STEM subject would have destroyed me. Now, degree is the only thing I like about uni, but it's not ideal. Right. Well, Nietzsche and Wig, your avatar in this stream is a man. So you wouldn't be accepted to a STEM program anyway. Now, I'm not saying that you would be murdered for applying. I think you could probably get away with that, but you wouldn't be accepted. So it's a moot point. Albert says, what utter nonsense? Why wouldn't you study something you love to study? Feel free to do it if you're the son of an earl and you have an earldom to step into. But 9 times out of 10, the odds are hugely in favor of the thing you love being non-remunerative. So you study it, you pour in all that money, all that time, you get a degree that's worthless. And then what do you do? then what do you do? So I guarantee you it's not utter nonsense. I am not 20. So I'm not talking utter nonsense. Aslan says, unless your passion is computer science or engineering, then major in those. Well, yes. If you're that's actually not absurd. If your passion is coding or something like that, yeah, then major in that. Absolutely. That has real world practical applications. A degree in mythology is worthless. Might be fun to do, but it's worthless. And the goal of college is not a fun little finishing school for the 1% of 1% of the affluent in America, like it was 150 years ago. It's extremely practical and utilitarian now. So the kids who go into it and think, well, I love mythology, so I'll major in mythology. If they have parents who don't put a stop to that, then they end up 4 years later with a degree that's no use at all to anything. And it's like they never went to college and they're 4 years behind everybody else in the workforce. Dylan says Vidal gave similar advice in the late 80s that all Americans should learn Russian, Chinese, and Japanese. Prepare for the world we live in, not the one you wish for. Nietzsche and Wig says, my avatar is Jim Reeves, by the way, the great country singer. Wanted to explain that, didn't you? Cosmic A says, thoughts on Memoirs of Cleopatra by Margaret George. Well, now you're trying to keep the chat going, but we have to close things up. Of course, I have a long story about the Memoirs of Cleopatra. Because I was working in a bookstore when Margaret George was touring for the book before that, and I was always the one that was teamed up with authors, because I could talk about them. I could talk about their books. I could talk to them when they didn't have people at their table, and she didn't for a lot of time. She didn't. And anybody else would just be standing there not knowing what to say. So the managers quickly agreed to my proposition that if an author comes in, let me talk to them. I've read their books. I will keep them occupied. I will also help with sales. And so I did, and she and I were talking about her next book, which was going to be about Cleopatra and all sorts of stuff that was going to go into it and all the research that she was doing. And she was saying, some of the translations that I'm getting from some of these different abstruse, out of the way sources that I want to use, I just little bits and pieces of translating myself, and through some of the difficulties of some of the other translations, she took me up on it, was happy to take me up on it. And then months and months and months later, I forgot about it. And months and months and months later, the book came out. Memoirs of Cleopatra. And I don't know if you have your copy near you, but it has a huge number of acknowledgments, a huge number of thank yous. Uh, and there wasn't a word to me, not a single word to Snake Boy. Uh, anyway, Peyton's that's those. I realize those aren't thoughts on the book. The book is too long. Uh, uh, Peyton says, okay, so we should major in business and Chinese and then get into international business. I'll think about this actually. Well, it doesn't have to be business and Chinese. There are a whole bunch of things it could be. But if you love sitting around all day reading the Romantic poets and you think, well, I'll major in English and I'll study the Romantic poets, don't. Don't think that. That is wrong. You will not do that, and you're buying yourself at least 10 years of misery. Uh, Jenny Park says, I feel bad for people who have degrees that they can't use. Yeah, yeah. And the reason that so many people in the 21st century have degrees that they can't use is because when they asked this question of whatever quasi-adult figure is in their life, that quasi-adult figure lied to them, misled them, let them down, and said, follow your passion, dear. That is not good advice. For a young person who does not know any better, that is not good advice. There are times when you, as an older person who's been down the path a little further, there are times when asked for your advice on the nature of that path, you must be honest. And they aren't. And a lot of people have useless degrees as a result. This, okay, there we go. I keep getting a box popping up, and I don't like that. I don't know how to stop it either. I don't know what I'm doing to cause this to happen. Let's see here. Brian says, can I read Victoria's Secret catalog and call it Victorian Pastiche for Victober? Victober is almost over. Street Medic says, I still have my Wheelock's Latin from college. All I got out of it is that I can recognize obscure root words. Tolstoy 111 says, get a marketable degree and then job in hand, get your passion degree in your spare time. Eminently possible to do. Eminently possible. In fact, a very good practical plan. Yeah. Get a degree in something that you can use, even if it bores you. Get a degree in something that you can use. Could very well be that in getting that degree, you realize there are aspects of it that don't bore you. Get a degree in something you can use, and there'll be plenty of time for your passion. It's not going anywhere. Michael V says, thanks for a live stream that isn't in the middle of the night, Citizens of Europe. Nietzsche and Wig says, master plan, marry into money, and pay for your passion that way. Street Medic says, what's your favorite board game? I don't have any favorite board game. Maybe if I had to choose one, it would be chess. Brian says, I did economics. I liked it, but don't actually have to use it directly, but it's good business prep, but lets you do more reading than accounting or finance. Dylan says, oh goodness, Queen Victoria in lingerie is rather disturbing image, fitting for All Hallows Eve. Street Medic says chess is correct. Well, it was a question about my favorite something, so there is no correct or incorrect answer. Tolstoy 111 says, I was a comp sci major along with English and got English MA at night while working in IT. There you go. There you go. See, it is possible to do. You're not selling out to your future self. You're not doing that to make sure that you can afford the rent in your apartment when you graduate. That is not selling out. That is practical advice. Peyton says, let's see here. Auntie Gaia says, get your degree at the Wharton School of Finance. Yeah, have someone else pay for it and have someone else take the tests and write the papers. Peyton says, I told Harvey K I might major in business, and he flicked me off because he went into a whole thing about business majors, and business is for graduate school, not undergrad. I value both opinions. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. There's no light switch that turns on at grad school. The more prep work you do for your grad degree as an undergrad, the better off you'll be when you take your grad degree. What are you supposed to? What is he saying? What is Harvey K saying? Interpretive dance in a tutu until you graduate, and then the minute you become a grad student, buckle down to finance with classrooms full of people who've been taking pre-business for the last 4 years. That doesn't make any sense at all. I think a business major is valid and a smart idea paired with a language, as you said. Aslan says, I am also going to read a reader's manifesto. I heard you wrote it under a pseudonym. Is that true? No, it's not true. I, I had to say that to the whole of the literary critical world when that little booklet came out. And I don't think anybody believed me. I did. No, it is not true. I did not write that book. Street Medic says, I was going to go back to school, learn how to be a Playboy photographer. Peyton says, Harvey was saying business doesn't make you smarter. No, no one's saying that it does. No one's saying that it does. We're talking about employment after college. That's what we're talking about. Nothing else. Notice I did not say meaningful or satisfying employment. I said employment after college. That's what we're talking about. That is what college has to be. 150 years ago, if you were the second oldest son in the Roosevelt family and you wanted to go to college to learn trochaics, you could do that. And that would be wonderful. And your family would applaud, because not only would you never want for money, money was settled on you when you were in the cradle, but there are 5 family businesses that you can just walk into the minute you want to. But if you're not that, and no one is that anymore, college is where you prepare for a job that will keep you when you graduate. Taffy says, I got my degree in anthropology, came to my senses and went to law school. Would love to go back to anthropology, though. Yeah, anthropology is awful cutthroat. The impression I get is that it's really hard and that there's very little in the way of remunerative work. Maybe it's changed since I last talked to anybody about it. Geo Craftsman says, I'm currently a major in industrial design. There you go. I'll still get mountains of reading done while here and full access to the library. I feel like I've been double majoring with only one major. Yeah. A lot of industrial design, things like that. If you've got a brain in your head, you're going to be able to handle the requirements of such a degree without them consuming your entire life, which means there'll be parts of your life left over to read literary biographies or histories of the postal system or whatever. Nietzsche and Wig says, I considered becoming a commercial lawyer, then passed due to soul-destroying nature of commercial law. The money would have been nice, though. Taffy says, everything Steve is saying is correct. Good Lord, I like the sound of that. Street Medic says, your major is based on you gotta eat. Peyton says, is it practical to learn Chinese at 28? I think you'd love it. Chinese, Japanese, German, some language, but not Latin. not Latin. It helps to be able to go out into the world with your degree. And although I think English language is kind of the lingua franca of most professional circles in the world, you'll never go. For instance, if you're a young person and you go to Japan and you want money, you'll never go broke teaching English. Japanese cities can't get enough of people teaching English because young Japanese people understand that. Young Japanese professionals understand that their chances for advancement are much greater if they know English and really know it, able to just switch into English and talk that way. And everybody else does too. Aslan says, in academia, even STEM subjects don't have many jobs. Right. 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 I wasn't saying that they don't have, I wasn't saying that they have many jobs. I'm just saying they have no jobs for men. Probably don't have many jobs for women either. Street Medic says, my daughter speaks Japanese. Peyton says, I'm half Korean. Would that work? Oh my. There you go. Well, half Korean, yeah, but what does that mean? I mean, is that in your culture? Do you know Korean? Boy, could you build on that? You really could. Nietzsche and Wig says, Jew the Obscure is an appropriate book for this conversation. Peyton says, my mom was adopted, so I don't speak only English and broken Spanish. Brian Constantine says, I've done Chinese in Duolingo for over a year now, not going to ever do anything with it, but I like learning something different. Peyton, you can always email me, right? On this and any other subject. You all can. Steve says, preparatory to wrapping up the stream. Manny says, what about ancient Greece? Seems practical. I mean, you can quote Homer, which I'm sure is super useful somehow. People do it. Students do it. They think, wow, I had that one teacher in high school and he made Pericles in Athens sound so interesting. So I'm going to major in that. Yay. And then what happens? You're a bitter 35-year-old alcoholic postdoc still waiting for the smallest place to open anywhere in the world where you can use your degree. In the meantime, you're bagging food at Trader Joe's and living a horrible life, a life of totally blasted expectations. Just don't do it to yourself. Street Medic says, I've been to a lot of countries and just about everyone speaks English. And when they don't, they want to. Uh, Tolstoy 111 says, a degree in medieval folk dancing is the path to fame and fortune. Dylan says, speaking of a foreign language, especially as an Anglophone, is surefire way to always be employed and quick to make friends. People love to hear their native tongue from perceived arrogant Anglo. Andrew says, you might be onto something. My employers didn't seem that interested in post-structuralism. No, they won't seem. Peyton says, yeah, I might just email you. Feel free about any subject, but this one. Brian says, if the election goes bad, dude broology will be a major. Nietzsche Wig says, I was raised bilingual, but the language my family speaks is worthless. Oh, there's no language that's worthless. Daniel Blake says, hi, everyone. Steve, can Augustine's, that's St. Augustine to you. Confessions, the City of God, be enjoyed without the intimate knowledge of the Bible. I did read it once. Yeah. The Penguin translations, for instance, will have footnotes. Probably any translation that you get will have footnotes. No, you don't need an exhaustive familiarity with the Bible, although you should have it. Albert says, which is, but I have no idea what that's in reference to. Oh, Con, we want to end the Stevestream. We don't want to end on a non sequitur. Oh, that's a shame. We're going to end without. I wanted to end on a thumper because my country has a week left, and I wanted this did very much serve to distract me, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all of you, and I meant what I said about a journal, about starting a journal. Start and keep a journal. It's a really good idea. If you've never done it, or if you haven't done it in a long time, try it again. Dust it off. Make it a deep breath pause in your day. You'll really come to appreciate that you did that, even if you don't use the writing muscles that I'm talking about. Aslan says, when will the next stream be? Not for a long time. Tolstoy 111 says, top 20 French courtly poets, go. Jenny Park says, I'll learn folklore and then hunt for fairies. Nietzsche and Wig says, Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic studies is out there if anyone is interested. Yeah. And Taffy says, we appreciate you, Steve. There we go. That's the note that an egomaniac wants to end on. Thank you very much. You appreciate me. I appreciate you too. I really needed this to put a smile on my face, get me talking about other things. Remember, in the next week, especially if you're American, what's coming is horrible. It's awful. It's unprecedented. Nothing like it has ever happened in the history of the country. Nothing really like it has happened in the history of the world. A legal constitutional coup seems like a contradiction. Just keep in mind, self-care, that horrible phrase from the 21st century, self-care. There's nothing you can do about this at all. So practice turning off the news feed. Practice stopping yourself from doom scrolling. Practice picking up a physical book. It's a thing. A printed paper book. I know I'm a champion of ebooks. I absolutely love them. But ebooks you're just one finger press away from the worst news in the world. And with a printed paper book, you're not. So if we don't get to do a Steve stream between now and next week and next Wednesday, I don't know that we're going to be able to do a Steve stream between now and then. And I don't know that there will be streams after that. If we're not, thank you all for being here and try to take care of yourself. But I'm going to wrap this up for now and get back to work. So this was wonderful. I hate to say goodbye, but maybe we'll do this again. So I will wrap this up for now and I will talk to you all later. Thank you, BookTube.